Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a special partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is December 12th, 2022. We have a lot to talk about. Quick check of weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online website. You can go there. It brings up a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left. Most importantly, this Monday afternoon, we have a strong winter storm that's going to merge out into the Central Plains, and we have widespread winter storm warnings, including blizzard warnings for areas of western South Dakota, eastern Wyoming, western Nebraska, northeast Colorado. That's the same system that dumped a bunch of snow across the Intermountain West and areas around Lake Tahoe. Well, record snowfall here in Anchorage, 16.2 inches of snow with a snow water equivalent of 1.61 inches. This is the second in a series of heavy snowstorms that have come through the Anchorage area within just a week period, and we have yet the potential for another system later on this mid-week. But in the meantime, with all this added snow, avalanche warnings are in effect for the mountains around Valdez and Thompson Pass. Also, the avalanche danger is very high in through the Chugach Mountains, the east half there, the Kenai Peninsula, and areas east of Anchorage. So if you're going to be going out in the backcountry here to enjoy the recent snowfall, be aware and take those safety precautions, because avalanche danger is very high. There's a potential for a warmer storm. It means a little warmer air, but a lot of moisture moving into south central areas again Wednesday night into Thursday. It still looks like the bulk of this storm could be in the form of snow from the Anchorage Bowl northward, but some of the coastal areas could see rain or some freezing rain mix in or briefly change over to that, as there's going to be a little more in the way of warmer air than what we saw with the first two storms. But once that all gets by us, and then it's going to turn considerably colder, especially across the panhandle by early next week, where daytime high temperatures may not get much above the single digits above zero. Some very cold air backdoors in that area from northwest Canada. Well, looking at some of the FAA webcams today, way up there in the northwest, Point Hope, breezy, a little light snow, 16 degrees, a little colder air now settling back in there along northern parts of the state, including the North Slope. Kitnik there along the southwest coast, a low and frontal system is approaching there, passing through tonight and Tuesday morning. It's going to bring some gusty winds that could cause the snow to blow around and maybe a little light accumulations of snow. In Anchorage, all skies cleared out, digging out from well over a foot and a half of snowfall across the city, closing down schools and making for a very difficult commute even for people that had four-wheel drive. And then finally, Juneau, still seeing some snow yet into this evening early, breezy, a little light snow, 35 degrees. A winter weather advisory remains in effect there until 9 p.m. this Monday evening. So again, looking at the current advisories and warnings that we have up, there is a winter storm warning for the Copper River Basin until 9 p.m. and winter weather advisory for the northern panhandle, including Juneau and Skagway, until 9 p.m. as well. And then the other area of red from Valdez down along the Chugach Mountains there, the east side of Kenai, that is for avalanche warnings. So just be extremely careful if you're planning on doing any backcountry skiing, snow shoeing, or taking snow machines out. Now, back along the southwest coast, we have the next low and frontal system will be coming up in toward just west and north of Kuskokwim Bay, and as that system moves through, it'll produce some breezy conditions with some additional light snow or light mix of precipitation the further south that you are from there. Looking at the satellite imagery this afternoon, we can see the system now lifting out of south central and pushing up now into Canada. We have the next system, next wave that's out there near just north of St. Paul. You can see the curl in the clouds. That's that low pressure system. Frontal band extends along just off the southwest coast. But notice the moisture as you get down just south of Sandpoint and Unalaska, and follow that back to the lower left of your screen. That is the initial push of moisture that's going to be moving up into south central areas Wednesday night and Thursday. This is an atmospheric river. It's a deep plume of milder, moist air that's going to trigger another significant precipitation events across southern parts of the state. Low pressure remains there near just southeast of Prince William Sound, north central Gulf. We see the other low coming on shore there up near Kuskokwim Bay overnight tonight, early on Tuesday morning. Secondary low near Kodiak Island early on Tuesday morning, and then by Tuesday afternoon we see that one low kind of park right up where the last one was there, just southeast of Prince William Sound, while the other main low comes inland up into the Kuskokwim River Basin on the west side of the Alaska Range, bringing with it another round of some lighter snow. And then Wednesday, there is that front that's stalled out with the atmospheric river and an overrunning push of warmer, moist air that's going to trigger another significant precipitation event here Wednesday night into Thursday. So stay tuned for future watches, warnings, and advisories. In the meantime, relatively mild there in the Panhandle, above freezing for tonight in many spots, but out to the west, below zero. Glen Ellen also 12 below there as you get toward McGrath. And then daytime highs colder there up through the Copper River Basin, Talkeetna 16, 40-ish as you go down along the southern Panhandle, as well as at Kodiak Island and going out along the Alaska Peninsula. And Wednesday morning, lows maybe not quite as chilly just because of increasing clouds. Temperatures generally lower 30s in the Panhandle, and you can see readings along the coast will be upper 30s to near 40, but as you get inland, temperatures still generally in the 20s west side of the Kenai up through the Anchorage Bowl. Much colder than it's been, below zero readings there, especially south side of Brooks Range, Yukon Valley, north of the Alaska Range, some readings below 20 below. And then Tuesday's high, single digits above, in some cases below zero at Arctic Village and Fort Yukon. And then Wednesday morning, we are looking for low temperatures to be again back down below zero in most areas with some isolated 20 below readings, and daytime highs on Wednesday afternoon generally for the interior North Slope a little bit above or below zero, teens along the western and southern parts of the Seward Peninsula and surrounding Norton Sound. Going out along the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, temperatures will stay above freezing Tuesday morning, but then afternoon highs could get back up in the lower 40s, Dutch Harbor on up through Falls Pass and up toward Kodiak. Colder though up the Yukon River, some temperatures there not getting much above 10 above, and then Wednesday morning lows sub-zero as you get up further up the Yukon River and toward the central parts of the state, single digits elsewhere, but near and above freezing along the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutian Chain. And then Wednesday afternoon, that push of milder air just along the Alaska Peninsula. We expect high temperatures lower, even some mid-40s. And here's the extended temperature outlook. Below normal temperatures along the Alcan border in the east and especially across the Panhandle, as I mentioned. By early next week, there are indications a pretty good push of Arctic air is going to kind of backdoor in from the east across the Panhandle, so that daytime highs by next Monday there in the Panhandle may only be in the single digits. Further west, temperatures should remain a bit above normal across the southwest, Bethel, Dillingham, down through and across the Alaska Peninsula. Precipitation below normal across the Panhandle and a little above normal across portions of the southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's look at your aviation weather now for Tuesday into Wednesday. An active weather pattern remains across southern parts of the state. We're just digging out of a big snowstorm in the Anchorage area and the south central portions of Alaska there, and we are now looking at another weaker system pushing across the southwest into south central areas on Tuesday. This system won't have nearly the amount of precipitation, the liquid equivalent precipitation associated with it as the last one and the storm the week before. Nevertheless, as it pushes east, we expect IFR conditions to expand up through the central Yukon Valley, as well as along the and south of the Alaska Range and areas of the Gulf Coast, and also in through areas of the northern Panhandle in the intercoastal mountains there of the southeast. Now on Wednesday, we'll see those IFR conditions spread further east toward the Alcan border, east of the Yukon Flats, and down through portions of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and then much of the Panhandle. But notice off to the southwest, just south of the tip there of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific, there will be an expanding area of IFR conditions along a stalled frontal boundary that'll drape across the Gulf. And then just south of the Alaska Peninsula, this system is going to be a significant weather maker, and that we have a atmospheric river, a plume of moisture coming up out of the North Pacific. That is heading northeastward and will be riding up Cook Inlet here as we go into the day on Thursday, bringing potentially another heavy round of precipitation that could include heavy snow, as well as potentially a mix or a change over to some rain and freezing rain in some areas, especially along the coast and even parts of Cook Inlet, maybe even the west side of the Kenai Peninsula. So stay tuned to later forecast. In the meantime, Anatuvik Pass, VFR, as will be Adigan Pass there in the Brooks Range for Tuesday. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, as that moisture spreads eastward from the southwest interior. Rainy Pass, IFR. Windy Pass will start out early VFR but become IFR as that moisture works its way up from the south and east. And then Isabel, looking at VFR conditions becoming MVFR later in the day, and Metasta should be able to hold on to VFR conditions just by virtue of being further east. As we drop south and west, Tanita Pass, VFR becoming MVFR, and then of course Portage, we'll see more in the way of that moisture working its way in from the west, so VFR giving way to IFR conditions during the day Tuesday. And Chilkoot and White, generally IFR conditions should hold. There could be a very brief period of MVFR conditions early in the day, but otherwise IFR conditions should generally be the rule there. Freezing levels, surface freezing line drapes down along Bristol Bay, Prince William Sound, inner channels of the Panhandle, and then you can see that little bump of freezing levels of loft, 2,000 feet Kodiak Island, and then 4,000 and 6,000 feet as you venture further south into the North Pacific. The greatest threat for some moderate icing will be areas of the southwest, west and southwest arm of the Alaska Range, and perhaps along the Kenai coast into parts of Prince William Sound, and that's generally above 3,000 feet. And then look south of the eastern Aleutians, there's that plume of moisture beginning to creep northeastward, and that'll be a deeper field of moisture, an atmospheric river, starting at above 5,000 feet, and that will expand northeastward as we head into Wednesday and certainly by Thursday. Upper level jet stream winds. We have a strong jet core in excess of 110 to 125 knots from the west-southwest, from the eastern Aleutians all the way up the Alaska Peninsula, across the western northwest area of the Gulf Coast. And at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, a jet core of 70 to 85 knots there through the lower Gulf and North Pacific, well off of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Also some stronger winds aloft there coming into the lower Chukchi Sea northwesterly at 65 knots. And then finally bringing it down to 3,000 feet, weak low circulation over the northern Gulf on Tuesday with a broad area of 40 to 45 knot winds covering much of the Gulf. And then we also have another area broad 40 to near 50 knot winds out over the lower and western Bering Sea. And turbulence, we could expect some areas of moderate turbulence along the western Brooks Range, as well as down across the southwest interior, along areas of the northern Gulf Coast, western Gulf Coast, extending out along the Alaska Peninsula and back through the Aleutian chain, generally surface to 4,000 feet. So that wraps up your aviation weather. Stay tuned to later forecast. Check the latest conditions, and if you are able to get off the ground, have a safe flight.
It can be many miles long, from 1 to 100 feet high, traveling at 400 miles per hour. This ocean monster is known as a tsunami, and it can wreak havoc on coastal populations and landscapes. A tsunami is a series of ocean waves caused by any large and sudden disturbance of the sea surface. Tsunamis can be generated by landslides, volcanic eruptions, or even meteorite impacts in the ocean, but they are most often caused by an earthquake where there's a sudden displacement of the ocean floor. When that happens, there's a transfer of energy from the sea floor to the ocean, causing waves on the surface to radiate outward in all directions. In deep waters, these waves may not even be detectable. But when the tsunami enters shallower waters, the wave speed slows and its height increases. The water along the coast may recede noticeably. A large wall of turbulent water, called a bore, may also form. When the tsunami hits, it may come ashore like a fast-rising flood and strike with devastating force. The The series of waves may continue for hours. The first one may not be the last or the largest. For your safety, know the potential warning signs of an incoming tsunami. A strong earthquake that causes difficulty standing. A rapid rise or fall of the water along the coast. A loud ocean roar. When you're in a coastal area, it's important to keep alert for messages from local officials, such as lifeguards, police, the U.S. Tsunami Warning Centers, and NOAA All Hazards Radio. If you find yourself in a location of a tsunami strike, here's what you need to do to stay safe. Keep calm. Walk or run to higher ground, 100 feet above sea level or 1 mile inland. Do not drive. Keep roads open for emergency vehicles. If you cannot move to higher ground, use the stairs to get to the 3rd floor or higher in a sturdy building. Follow all instructions from local officials and stay out of coastal areas until authorities issue an all clear. Tsunamis can strike any coastline in the world and can affect locations thousands of miles away from where they formed. They may be uncommon, but the devastation they cause makes them a deadly force in nature. For more information on tsunamis, go to the following sites.
Tsunami, a killer wave, speeding across the ocean at 400 miles an hour. It smashes into land, destroying everything in its path. Tsunamis do not have a season, but they can strike any coast at any time. If one forms close to the shore, the shaking of the earth and a loud roar may warn of its approach. But when a tsunami forms across the ocean, it can take hours to reach the shore, enough time to warn people to move to higher land. Over the past 20 years, NOAA has developed DART, a real-time monitoring system that provides data for forecasting tsunamis. The DART systems have been deployed in earthquake-prone areas throughout the ocean, including the Pacific and Indian basins. A DART system combines a surface buoy and a sensor on the ocean floor. This sensor detects changes in water pressure and seismic activity and transmits the data back to the surface. If these changes indicate a tsunami may form, the buoy signals an alert via satellite to the tsunami warning centers in Alaska and Hawaii. Back at the centers, scientists plug the data into pre-existing models. These models predict the height, the arrival time, and the coastal locations that the tsunami will hit. Watches and warnings are issued to the affected communities so preparations can begin. Today, 47 DART stations are positioned all around the world, ready to detect and warn coastal communities about the next potential tsunami. With the DART system and tsunami warning centers in place, we are now better prepared to predict a killer wave before it strikes.
December 26, 2004. What began as an undersea earthquake in the Indian Ocean ended as the most deadly tsunami in recorded history, with nearly 240,000 lives lost. This was a devastating wake-up call to coastal communities and tsunami research. Prior to this event, only 6 of NOAA's Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunami, or DART, buoys were in place. Scientists could only predict tsunami arrival times, not flood potential. And there was not a global tsunami warning system. Today, 10 years later, we can tell a different story. U.S. and international coastlines are far better prepared for such a catastrophe, thanks in large part to research and technology developed at the NOAA Center for Tsunami Research at Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory. NOAA's DART array is now complete, with 39 buoys operated by the National Weather Service's National Data Buoy Center. Along with 21 international buoys, this array can measure a tsunami wave as small as 1 centimeter in the open ocean and provide these data in real time to forecast when a tsunami may hit the coast and how much flooding there will be. NOAA scientists and engineers are currently testing the 4th-generation DART buoy that will be able to measure local tsunamis as well as distant ones. Flooding forecast models incorporate local topography and historical tsunami data in order to more accurately predict exactly how a tsunami might behave when it reaches shore. NOAA has 75 site-specific models that can provide high-resolution flooding forecasts for effective response and mitigation during a tsunami event. NOAA has gathered data from every tsunami since 2004 to improve its forecast models. Today, it operates the world's only real-time tsunami flooding forecast system using DART data to accurately compute flooding forecasts. The NOAA Tsunami Warning Centers make tsunami data available on the internet and issue advisories, watches, and warnings through the Emergency Alert System and via NOAA weather radios. While it is impossible to prevent a tsunami, we are now much better prepared to detect them and predict their paths and impacts, so those in coastal communities can take the steps necessary to safely protect themselves.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and before we get into our marine weather, let's look at the sea ice edge. Extensive ice across the Arctic and northwest coast, though there is a notably large area of open water there in the lower Chukchi Sea down through the Bering Strait. Otherwise, ice in place in areas of Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound, as well as along, though not as quite as extensive there in the lower Yukon Delta, nor in through areas of the Kuskokwim Delta. But nevertheless, there is still some ice there down through Bristol Bay and in pockets there, especially the north end, including Turnagain Arm. They're up in Cook Inlet. We don't expect any major issues with ice shifting out or doing anything unusual coming up here. The ice should remain in place there in the far north. As far as winds for the southeast panhandle, northwest 15 knots, Ketchikan waves 5 feet, but south winds 20 to 30 knots. Petersburg on up through Lynn Canal, 4 to 6 foot waves. Along the outer coast, look for southwest to west winds 20 to 25 knots, waves generally 12 to 13 feet. And then on Wednesday, winds will be out of the southeast there across the inner channels, 15 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, but 25 knots, Petersburg northward up through Lynn Canal with waves of 4 to 5 feet there. And the flow along the outer coast, it will be out of the west at 20 to 25 knots with waves 10 to 11 feet. Northwest portion of the Gulf, winds off of the Kenai will be southeast to 30 knots as we have a weak low that's sitting there just southeast of Prince William Sound. Easterly winds within the Sound 20 knots, waves 4 feet. And look for northeast winds, lower Cook Inlet down through Shelikof Strait at 30 knots with waves of 6 to 8 feet, locally higher there through Shelikof Strait. And then across the area on Wednesday, winds will be largely northeast there across Prince William Sound, as well as Cook Inlet. Winds 20 knots, Prince William Sound, 4 foot waves, winds upwards of 25 knots there, off of Anchor Point down through the entrance of Cook Inlet, with waves running around 6 feet. Now, across Kodiak Island on Tuesday, winds will be out of the southwest at 30 to 35 knots, waves 13 feet, Shelikof Strait, 16 to 18 feet in the open waters of the Pacific, and as high as 15 feet there just south of Bristol Bay with 35 knot southwesterly gales. For Wednesday, a frontal boundary is going to kind of hang up just south of the Alaska Peninsula. South of that boundary, we're looking at south to southeast winds, 35-knot gales, waves 15 to 19 feet. But on the north side, winds will be out of the northeast, 25 knots out of Bristol Bay, extending down north of Cold Bay with waves 8 to 11 feet. Across the Aleutian chain, winds will generally be out of the west-northwest and around 20 to 25 knots, though as high as 30 knots there north of Atka. Waves generally running 12-13 feet on the North Pacific side and 12 to 14 feet on the Bering side. For Wednesday, those winds turn more northerly, increase to 35 to 40 knot gales there across the central and eastern Aleutians. Waves 18 to 22 feet there south of the islands in the North Pacific and 15 to 19 feet on the north side in the Bering. And then across areas of the southwest coast, a mixed bag of winds and low pressure coming onshore there through the southwest interior. So winds on the backside of it will be northerly 15 knots up there Norton Sound with ice in place, but as high as 30 knots north side of Nunavik Island with waves of 12 feet, northwest winds to 20 knots around St. Paul with waves of 13 feet. And then kind of more of an offshore flow along Norton Sound and the areas of the southwest coast, the YK deltas, winds generally out of the having some sort of an easterly, northeast to east component at 15 to 20 knots. Waves in the open waters of the eastern Bering running generally 7 to 9 feet. And then along the Arctic coast for Tuesday, winds will be out of the south, kind of turning west toward Kaktovik with 10 to 15 knots with ice there. But where there is open water in the lower Chukchi Sea, west winds to 15 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet, and north winds to 25 knots through the strait, north side of St. Lawrence Island with 6-foot waves. And then on Wednesday, winds will generally be out of the southwest to west around 20 knots along the Arctic coast with ice in place, but in the lower Chukchi Sea, where there's still some open water expected, winds could be southeast 15 knots out of Kotzebue Sound, but westerly there into Cape Lisburne and Point Hope with 3-foot waves, and southeast winds to 20 knots north side of St. Lawrence Island with 8-foot waves. And the weather map, low pressure and frontal system pushes in through the southwest overnight, and then by Tuesday afternoon we'll have a weak low over the north central Gulf and one pushing into the interior, and then that front sets up with a stronger, wetter system impacting south central midweek.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.